Let's talk right now about net zero lunacy, as we often do on this show. Chris Morrison joins us. He's the environment editor of the Daily Sceptic. Good morning to you.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. So can you explain to us, we've talked about it this morning, but you know a lot more about this because you write about it an awful lot. Why is net zero policies, and not just Ed Miliband's, Keir Starmer's, and by the way, also the last Tory government's policy as well, why is that the reason why we've seen our energy bills going up? Well, they plan to go up in October.
Two words. I think we can start this conversation. Dale Vince, the 100% owner of Ecotricity.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show, sometimes in this parish, obviously. And he supplies Ecotricity 0.05% of the current electricity grid. And over the last 20 years, he has collected subsidies of £145 million.
That's excellent work. That's a good rate.
Yes. I ran a company myself. I mean, you always go after the low-hanging fruit. And 20 years ago, someone said, "Oh, you know these windmills that were invented around the time of Henry the Second, 12th century. Why don't we plaster them all over the place?" And nobody would do it as a commercial operation. But if we gave them loads and loads of money, and so I wish I'd have thought about putting a windmill up somewhere. In vast quantities of money. But this is, to be serious, this is an aggressive tax. This 145 million, because Vince is quite keen, obviously, on redistributing everybody's wealth, or rather the wealth of the rich. This 145 million that he's collected, pocketed over the years, is a regressive tax on the poor. And this is what is happening. We have got net zero that is out of control. The subsidies are out of control. £15 billion a year are loaded onto our bills. And this latest episode where Ofcom have said they've increased it, they've actually been forced to say, because the gas price is falling at the moment.
Because normally they say, well, you know, we're beholden, and Ed Miliband always says, it's the wholesale gas prices. We're dependent on all these gas-producing despots, and that's why our bills go up, which is a load of nonsense.
It's nonsense, because the wholesale price, which where we talk about the price of gas, is only a third of the price of the retail price. And the rest of it is all these horrendous, or much of it is the cost of the grid, the subsidies, and all of this sort of thing.
Yeah.
This particular thing, I think Ofcom noted that we were turning off power in all these obscure places that we have to put wind farms, like the Shetlands, where the wind is blowing, but obviously nobody lives there. We just don't have the grid, and we never probably will, because it would be horrendously expensive, and there's all sorts of delays in cables and transformers, and we certainly won't get it by 2030, that we're having to shut off. We're building all these farms with these enormous subsidies, and then we're having to pay them billions in order to shut off at certain times.
So we pay them to build the farms. By the way, the wind turbines, they're the ugliest things on the landscape. I would fell every single one tomorrow if it was up to me. But they're built on the other side of the world, largely in China, along with the solar panels, in factories that are powered largely by coal, one of the dirtiest forms of fossil fuel energy. They're then shipped over in tankers powered by diesel, oil, whatever, to the UK. They only have a life of about 10 years, and then God knows where we're going to put them all. But we're then paying to turn them off when the wind is blowing too much and when the wind doesn't blow. I'm almost thinking that this isn't a sensible policy, Chris.
It's a Ponzi scheme. I mean, in a former life, I was a financial journalist, and I covered the decline of Lloyd's during the 1980s, where they went from 2,000 investors to 20,000. And the way they were skimming the reinsurance off into shady places, sunny places with shady people, would have drawn the breath of the mafia in skimming Las Vegas.
And the same with green energy. I mean, we're not imputing the honesty of anyone in particular. I need to stress that for legal reasons. But again, the money's there. People spend it. Do you think that Ed Miliband and Keir Starmer, as much as he pays attention to detail, do you think Ed Miliband knows that the numbers don't add up and he hasn't got a chance in hell of achieving his net zero target? It's not 100% of electricity being produced without fossil fuels. Well, net zero fossil fuels by 2030 is now 95%. Do you think he knows that he can't do it, and he knows that it's all a complete con and unachievable and impossible and overpriced? Or do you think he actually believes it?
Well, I assume he's got more than one brain cell, so he can do the
big assumption there.
It's a bit. Well, let's assume that he's a certain amount of intelligence, if somewhat misguided. He must know. He must be able to see the figures. But he's a zealot. He's a Greta.
Yeah.
He's a Boris Johnson, quite frankly, who got at by who knows who when he came.
Wife.
By his wife, maybe, yes, yes. So people say, but also, a lot of people who are around him, the Met Office, the scientists, all these people, all the activists, and so. He is a zealot. He doesn't care. Remember that the Labour Party no longer really speaks for the working class. It's no longer a working class party. They kind of dislike the working class. Or put it this way, they like the working class less than they like soaking the rich. They hate the rich.
There is that, isn't there? Well, look, you mentioned the Met Office. That's another story I want to talk to you about, because it's leading item. You have a morning newsletter, the Daily Sceptic, which is one of my first reads of the day. And this is a topic that you guys have covered an awful lot with the help of a correspondent. And this is about the UK Met Office and their claims, of course, again and again, hottest summer ever, hottest winter ever, reached this temperature, according to this weather station and the like. And basically, the evidence is we're in smoking gun territory now. The Met Office at the UK, which where we get all our weather data, this is definitive. What is the temperature on my phone? The Met Office has told me what it is. They have over 100 non-existent weather stations where they estimate temperature using what they call well-correlated neighbouring sites. But now it appears that quite a lot of these, there isn't a neighbouring site, and it would appear that they're just simply making up the numbers. Tell us first of all about these non-existent weather stations and the weather stations which are perhaps of dubious value.
Well, the dubious value is that, if you want your hottest summer ever, you just use their 380 actual weather stations, which we wrote a story. We first started off a year ago when we did a Freedom of Information Act, and we found that 80% of their weather stations are in what I call junk classes 3 and 4. These are World Meteorological Organization gradings based on how near they are to unnatural heat sources such as airports and this kind of thing. 48% were in class 4, which comes with uncertainties, possible errors of 2 centigrade, and the 29% were in class 5 with 29%. They have just told us that the hottest summers ever is 16.19 centigrade. So they are using these junk sites that have errors up between 2 and 5 centigrade to tell us that we've had the hottest summer ever down to 100th of a degree.
Right, so we have a tiny increase in the top temperature, often recorded at Heathrow. Oh, 2 jumbo jets took off. What a surprise. It was extra hot at that moment. And yet the weather stations that are producing that data are simply not calibrated to actually be able to give that sort of level of accuracy. So they could be out by 5 degrees or not. I mean, that's crazy. But there's also the issue that some of the weather stations they claim to be getting information from don't actually exist. They've been closed down years ago.
This is another one. They also keep monthly averages for a whole load of stations. So if you go into their public domain website, you can type in, say, Lowestoft, and you will see a station identified as Lowestoft. Lowestoft closed in 2010. So what they then do is they give you 5 nearby stations, all of which are closed. Now, what do? They say, the correspondent you're referring to is a guy called Ray Sanders, who's devoting his retirement to...
Great job, Ray. Service to the people.
Those are the people. He's going through every single one of these websites, and he's pointing out the deficiencies. And he's pointing out that he's using the Freedom of Information Act, and the Met Office eventually got fed up and said they weren't going to answer anymore because they were vexatious and not in the public interest. Yeah, what Ray was doing was that he was asking for the Met Office to say that they estimate these sites like Lowestoft from well-corroborated neighbouring stations.
But so they won't say which ones they are, and some of them we know are definitely not in existence. I mean, this is an extraordinary scandal, an absolute scandal, that the scientific data that we're told is the basis of these claims could possibly be being made up. And the Met Office can clearly clear this up very simply by providing all the information, which we would implore them to do right now if they're watching. Chris Morrison, time's against us. Thank you. You've explained that brilliantly. Environment editor at the Daily Sceptic, Chris Morrison. Very brief word from Philip Ingram. I mean, look, you're a military man. You rely on clear data. This is looking very fishy.
It is very fishy, but again, the Met Office could easily explain this by turning around and saying we're using other means to gather that data. The satellites
making it up sometimes.
Well, no, but the satellite data that exists there can take spot temperatures at any part of the planet.
Well, then they should say that's what they're doing.
They should say that
if that's what they're doing. Exactly.